Hello everyone and welcome back to JB's Total Gaming, where today I'm going to be taking a look at Impulse, a game for 2 to 6 players that plays in between a half an hour and an hour depending on number of players and your familiarity with the game. So this is a game by Carl Chudyk, and if you're familiar with him, he's the designer of Glory of the Rome and Matai and I. You're going to have cards, you're going to use them for all different kinds of abilities. This is going to be a quick review. We're not going to go in depth as to how to play the game, but take a quick look at what the game is about and what I think about it. Now Impulse is really a lovely game with a lot of lovely decisions. For example, when you start the game, you're going to take a look at whatever your home planet would be, pick it up and put it into your hand of cards, and then decide which card you want to put back down. And then whenever you go explore a new planet, you're going to do the same thing, picking it up, looking at all of your cards and deciding which card you want to reveal out onto the board, and then this is going to give you actions that you can do later in the game by landing on that planet with these ships. So that's a nice little lovely thing. Another thing, every turn the very first thing you're going to do is add a card to the Impulse where you get the name of the game. And the Impulse is something that later on in your turn and every other player's turn, they're going to be able to use these cards in the Impulse. Now it can only ever get up to 4 cards long, but you have this thing where each player is adding something and each other player is then going to be using those abilities as you play the game. So after you play a card, then you can use one of your techs. Now we see here we have 2 basic techs that we start with. Each faction starts with one of the same, and then later on you can use these cards to upgrade one of your techs, and you can actually replace both of them. So here's another little lovely decision. You can also have cards that you eventually place down as minerals, and then whenever you have minerals, you can boost certain actions. So you basically get a point for every ship when you land on a card and a point for every matching mineral. Now this is blue and this is green, so they don't match, but you basically get to boost certain actions when you land on things based on the minerals you have that match the planet, and then also the ships that you use, and you combine those totals. So this one allows you to research a size 1 card. So you get to boost though, because this is a highlighted one up to maybe a level 2 or a level 3, and then you can see the cards have different sizes. This is a level 3, a level 1, a level 3, here's a level 2 down here in the tech. So these things allow you to increase as you go, which is another really nice thing. You also have your own plan that you can build. So you can put cards over here, and much like the Impulse, as you can put cards in there, and then you can eventually, once you get 4, you have to activate it, means that you can just have crazy turns where you add a card to the Impulse, you use one of your techs, then you go ahead and use the Impulse in order. And then you can, if you want to, use or delay your own plan. You can delay as long as you have less than 4 cards, then you can go ahead and do your plan. Then you score points depending on what's gone on, and then you draw 2 cards and then trim the Impulse if it needs to be trimmed. So here's the thing, on a turn, you could do place a card, and then you have your tech that you can do. You have 4 actions up here. You have maybe 4 actions in your plan. You can have really complicated turns. Now that's not going to happen all the time, and to be fair, in general, the actions on these cards aren't super complicated, and it's going to be usually pretty rare that the player isn't going to be able to figure out what they want to do with their actions, and these big turns don't happen all the time, and you're certainly interested in what other players are doing, but think of all the lovely choices that you have. So one of these actions might be to move around, and then you're triggering other actions on these cards, and then maybe there's moves on here. So you can have turns where you're doing all kinds of neat combos and getting in minerals and then boosting other actions and maybe trading cards for points. And there's a lot of neat things you can do, and this game is kind of a puzzle where as you're looking out on the layout on the board, what cards you have in your hand, what cards you have in the Impulse, what cards you have in your plan, what you can boost, each turn is kind of a little puzzle. And while some turns are going to be kind of boring, you're not going to be able to do a whole bunch, you're using those turns to set up for big turns. So this seems like a really lovely game, kind of an abstract puzzle where you're exploring space, but trying to figure out the best possible maneuvers. But we haven't really talked about these guys yet. So there are transports and then there are cruisers, and these can fly through spaces, and if they fly through a space then they'll reveal it, but you don't get to do the actions. So what use are these? Well, if later in the game, let's say green comes over here and they want to score some points because by landing in the center sector you score points, if red were to happen to move through here with their cruiser and there was no defense, they would just destroy these ships. So far this has been a really lovely game, but now we get to the combat and the meat of things, because the ways you can score points are by landing here, by trading in your mining resources, which is an interesting decision because you're using them to buff things, but you're eventually going to want to get points because once you get to 20, you're the winner and the game ends instantly. You can also trade cards from your hand for points, and but you also get points for patrolling this sector with your cruisers. So if you have multiple gates that are patrolling it, then you're going to score more points at the end of the turn, but you're also making yourself a target. Because you can't just fly through a sector if another player has units patrolling as well. So red wouldn't be able to just fly through here, they would have to do combat. And that's another way you can score points. You get a point every time you blow up a ship and every time you win a combat. And we won't get into combat, it's a little bit tricky, it involves drawing cards and boosting things, and it's probably the most fiddly part of the game, but it's still interesting. And there's also a sabotage ability that might allow you to blow up ships without actually getting into combat. You won't get a bonus point for winning that combat because it wasn't an actual combat, but you still get a point for blowing up ships. And at the end of the day, it's a race to 20 points. But trying to figure out what to do, where to put your different units, what type of units you want, whether or not you want to focus on military, or you just want to have some protection, or you want to risk it or go all out military, those are all interesting decisions. But is this game going to be for you? Because it's definitely a game of two halves with an interesting puzzle you're trying to figure out, and then also that combat aspect that can be really brutal. So do I recommend Impulse? Well, if you follow my channel, you know I don't like to give like a flat-out score or say a game is good or bad unless it's really objectively bad. Because at the end of the day, different people are going to enjoy different things. And for me personally, this is my favorite Carl Chudyk game. I liked Glorious Room, but I've only played it once, so I'd have to play that more to really be sure about that. But I feel like this game offers a lot of, value for money. And that's something also, I try to be a pro-consumer channel and talk about price. So this is a pretty inexpensive game, and it seems pretty simple. There's cards and chips, and that's really all there is to it. But the amount of game you get in this box is really interesting. So before I praise it too much, let's talk about who may not like this game. First of all, that combat can be brutal. So you can just get wrecked and have your planes go to waste and big fleets be destroyed. Maybe an opponent has a combination of things you didn't expect everybody to have and make a big move and move across the galaxy, maybe do multiple combats in a turn, something like that, and just really destroy you. So if you're not okay with that in-your-face aspect of it, then you might want to stay away from it. Also, the aspect that isn't combat is a little bit of an abstraction. It's a puzzle. It may be kind of complicated at first. Now here's the thing. I'm just giving a warning. For some people, it may be a little much. Your turn having, the impulse and then your text and then the planets you land on, different things, all of that combining into really complicated puzzles may be a little much at first. But I do want to point out in my experiences playing this game with several different groups of people, usually by about turn 3 or 4, everyone has that moment where they go, aha, I get it now. And then all of a sudden the game runs pretty smoothly at that point. So this is a game of interesting decisions, and I feel like for a game that just has some cards and some ships for a small price point, the interesting decisions you get in this game is comparable with like a $60, full big boxed game, and I really appreciate it for that. So while I think there's a few caveats that might keep some people away, and there is a learning curve and a little bit of fiddliness, especially in the combat, and then trying to keep track of all the different things you can do, all the case circumstances, wait, can I move into this sector if you're patrolling here and stuff like that. But once you get over that, I feel like there's a lot of interesting decisions on offer, and it's not an overly complicated game once you get over that initial hurdle. So Impulse is a game that I can pretty highly recommend if those caveats don't keep you away from the game. If that combination of kind of abstract puzzle, what should I do to maximize things, and what sort of strategy do I want to go for, because this is a really interesting game where you might be setting up for a big move and other players are kind of taking away, and maybe you're able to jump ahead, or in a turn you're able to get a lot of points, because 20, I'll say the game starts off slow and you're getting a point here or there and you're like, wow, this is going to be a long game, and then all of a sudden an engine kicks in and somebody's getting 8 points in a turn or something like that, and the game's over and somebody makes a big move, or maybe that player who's been ticking away slowly is able to get there before you can execute your plan. I mean, you can go heavy military, but if you do, you're not landing on planets because the military ships don't activate planets, and you can try to avoid heavy military, but then you can just be wiped out. So it kind of forces you to, you need to go with a strategy, and do you want a mix of everything? Maybe a little bit of mining, maybe a little bit of trading, maybe a little bit of combat. Do you just want enough defense so that you can defend your ships, but have a bunch of big fleets moving around getting big bonuses, which you can do, but you're spending all of your time building up your fleets and not taking other actions, and maybe other players are scoring points while you're building your engine. So all of those are interesting decisions that this game has to offer in a pretty small box, so it's one that, again, apart from those aspects that some people might not like, is a pretty solid game, especially at this price for those of you trying to game on a budget. So thanks a lot for watching, and we will talk to you again soon.